Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got Brendan Keegan with me. Brendan, how you doing?
Great, Brett. Thanks for having me on today.
It's awesome to be with you. You got a little, is it a little cloudy there in New York City today?
It is very cloudy. Matter of fact, we're on a 7-day rain tour right now, and it's cloudy and foggy.
We're cloudy now. We had a little sun yesterday and today. In St. Louis, I don't know if you've ever been here or not, but you can go from like 40 degrees in one day and then it'll be like 90 the next day. So we've gone from kind of being a little windy and chilly and rainy to now today it's going to be 90. So it's like, welcome to summer.
Well, Brett, I'll tell you that my last visit to St. Louis was very memorable. I went out to a Cardinals game. I was super excited until they drove the Blues around with the Stanley Cup trophy, and they had just beat the Boston Bruins, and I'm a Bruins fan. So
yeah,
big sports town in St. Louis, great sports town.
Absolutely. Well, I guess that's the one thing we got on you. We got the Stanley Cup on you that one year, but then you guys got a historic team there, obviously. But you got us in the 2004 and the 2013 World Series for your Red Sox. So, I guess it's 2-1.
Yeah. And then it's a great sports town. I think I also remember when after we beat in 2004, we took a shortstop, Edgar Renteria.
Yep.
And Tom La Russa said that's a big mistake. He shouldn't have signed there. He's a sensitive guy. He won't last in Boston. And halfway through the season, when his name was Renterek, they wound up trading him. He had an off season, and so I think St. Louis fans are much nicer than Boston fans to their players.
Yeah, that's probably true. Well, you are a 6-time president and chief executive officer, 21-time board director, 2-time best-selling author, world's most innovative CEO award winner, and the visionary leader behind bFEARLESS Ventures, an investment advisory firm. So it's awesome to have you here today. And like I start every show, Brendan, is really what's helped make you the man that you are today.
Oh, wow. Tough question, easy question. I think when I look at anyone who's been successful in any profession, whether that was your St. Louis Blues, yourself, somebody in technology, I think it's outworking others, just having a work ethic that's relentless. A second thing is having a vision for what you want. I don't think the St. Louis Blues that year said, hey, we're happy with being a 500 team. They set out on a mission. They wanted to win the cup. And using that as an example, I think the Bruins were the better team, and I think St. Louis just played them tougher. They just wanted it more. And so, they worked. So, if I look at, whatever success I've had, it's really come from digging in, working hard, having a vision. Like, I knew early on in my life, I'm not sure why, I knew early on I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to lead businesses. And I didn't come from a business family. I didn't come from parents that ran a business or had been executives. I just knew that's what I wanted to do. And I think if you know what you want to do, that helps you get there. If you have an unrelenting work ethic to then do it, that's great. And then along the way, having incredible mentors. I had 5 mentors in my life that I would be nowhere, that I wouldn't have accomplished half of what I accomplished without them putting wind in my sails and also stopping me from doing stupid stuff when I was about to do stupid stuff. So there's the two sides when they give you the mentoring advice that pushes you, but also when they kind of put a leash on you and hold you back from doing some things that might not have been the right move.
Talk about those mentors for a minute, if you will. Did you reach out to those and they kind of became a mentor? Was it just by default? Because I think people that are growing businesses, it's amazing to me, whether that's a business coach, a mentor, we all have those, right? But maybe some industries, some people, maybe they don't have that. So if you're somebody listening to this, you're like, man, I need to find out really what my passions are, where I'm going. How did you do that with those mentors?
Yeah. So, I would say they were the 5 that I talk about were all organic. I had other ones that were set up in companies I was at, and those were good. And I don't mean to take away from those, but those weren't the ones that truly lasted, that kind of formed on, my first one was in college. It was, I was part of a group that was planning graduation. We started doing it junior year. I started working with one person in administration, and they just gave me some advice. I said, hey, as I look for jobs, and I'll tell you the best piece of advice they gave me, I still remember, it was fall senior year. She said, what the biggest decision you're going to make in your life is? And I said, first company I go to, I'm 21, I think. And she goes, no. And her name was Vicky. She goes, Brendan, it's going to be the person you marry. That's going to be your biggest decision. And I look back on that, just happened organically. We just got along. And then, as I went in my career, I think one thing that helped me have good mentors is I was kind of clear on where I wanted to go. So if I had a chance to meet somebody, they probably walked away and said, hey, there's a guy who's got some motivation. There's a guy who, someday wants to be an executive. So I think I made it easier for somebody to kind of, say yes or pick me, if you will. One was happenstance. It was an executive at a company I started, EDS, Ross Perot's company. We shared the same birthday. And he said, we ought to go golfing for my birthday. And I said, absolutely. I had never golfed before. So, by the way, he figured that out at the driving range and said, came over and said, kid, you never golfed before. I said, no. He goes, you didn't have to say yes. I go, I know I did. And believe it or not, that actually, I think, endeared him to me that I had never played. So he wound up teaching me how to golf.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, so I'd say more organic. And I think to young people out there, I mentor a number of young people, is I tell them, the key is to have a mentor, you have to know where you want to go. Like, a mentor can't help you get somewhere if you don't know where you want to go. If you have ideas of where you want to go, they can absolutely accelerate that path and journey for you.
Yeah. Talk about bFEARLESS Ventures. What is that?
Yeah. So last year on May 17th, after 25 years of being a CEO, and my son was graduating high school, I said I wanted to graduate life. So as he graduated, he was my youngest, graduated high school. I retired as an operating CEO, and I had set up a few years earlier bFEARLESS Ventures, which is an investment and advisory firm. So currently I own parts of 6 different companies. And I knew that, I'm a younger guy to have retired, and I'm 55, but I knew I had a tremendous amount of energy. I knew what my purpose in life was, to build 1 million fearless leaders. I just didn't want to operate in one company. I just said, I really want a chance to do multiple things. So over the last 5 years, I've been buying, pieces of different companies, from United Autosports, which won the 24 Hours of Le Mans last year, and we're defending next month. So I hope we defend it well. To part of Andretti Racing, to a country club, to Crane Stationery, a 200-year-old company, to Expressa Logistics. So, to Pure Electric, an e-mobility company. So it invests in companies, and then I serve on those boards. And then I also work with a few private equity companies, helping them in their portfolio companies drive enterprise value through more of an advisory role. And with that, everything that I do in it is really around what am I passionate about. The first, let's call it 25 years of being the CEO, that was the operating role. Now I'm getting a chance to work with many different organizations.
So talk about that Andretti Racing. I saw that doing my research. I thought that was pretty cool. So what's the role there? What's that about?
Yeah, so if you look at like all the racing teams, they have multiple teams. So Andretti has an Extreme E team, which is off-road racing, gender equality, male-female racing teams. That's what I'm a part of. And I actually...
And that's the E, like we're playing like a video game or like an actual
No, Extreme E as in electric.
Oh, got it.
Vehicle. And I originally got involved with Extreme E when I was McLaren's first partner in their Extreme E team. And then the way I became involved in that is United Autosports, which I'm a part of with the CEO of McLaren, Zach Brown, Richard Dean, former Le Mans winner himself, and the CEO. We owned part of Andretti Racing, and I had asked, hey, could I buy that from them? So I'm part of the Extreme E team. They have an Indy team. Now, I'm not part of that team. The way they set them up is like divisions, and you're one.
Yep.
And for those of you that follow Formula One, we know that Cadillac's coming into Formula One next year as the 11th team on the grid, and they're going to be having Andretti as part of that team. So, exciting. I grew up watching Magnum PI. I thought he was a pretty cool guy that drove a fast car. So ever since then, I've loved cars. And then later in life, I got into more racing, not personally, but just following racing. And then as I had a chance to invest in different companies, I said, hey, I'd like to invest in companies that things I'm passionate about. So my wife loves travel. So now we go to a lot of races and, we get to travel a lot.
It's incredible. Talk about I like to call it self-management versus time management, right? Because you have 24 hours in a day. I have 24 hours in a day. Walk us through your process for people that maybe they have one job and a family and they maybe feel overwhelmed, right? They're going to work, they're going to their kids' stuff. But those that run multiple companies, how do you do that to be a part of 6 different things, on boards, family, all the stuff that you're doing? Talk about that.
I've actually got a book coming out next year and it's called Conscious Balance. And it talks about 6 circles of balance you have to have. One is you have to manage yourself. If you don't manage yourself well, it's really difficult for you to manage time, with your family, your profession, your community, other things. So the first is value your time and where do you spend it? So if I personalize this, one thing that's been, I'll call it a little bit of a cheat code for me is, I've always been a early morning person. And, I get up early in the morning. I've done it for, 20 plus years, maybe even 30 years. And I just have kind of a consistent routine. So, and by the way, even if you're not a morning person, I encourage you, get up earlier than you normally would. And the next thing is the consistency. So, getting up early, for me, I write out, I got a little notebook here. I just write out my actions for the day. And as I've matured in my life, I go back 20 years ago, my actions for the day used to be like everything I wanted to do that week.
Right.
And you go to bed defeated. What I really do now is I kind of say, okay, here's my day. Here's the meetings I have. I've got 2 free hours to get stuff done. I can only do one thing today. I can only do 2 things today, whatever it is. But I'm very realistic with myself. I write out actions, but then I commit, this is what I'm going to do today. And by the way, when you do that, you get a sense of winning, and then winning is contagious. And, the next thing is getting a good workout in. And I always get asked, hey, what do you think the best workouts are? I go, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter that you're moving.
Walk a mile, do something.
Yeah. Walk, run, lift, do yoga, do CrossFit, do Pilates. It just doesn't matter. And, what I tell you is people that have probably consistently done that over their life have probably said, yep, I've done all of those. You get into a fad, you do CrossFit, and after 2 years, you're like, I don't want to do that anymore. And next thing you know, you're running or different things.
Can I talk about that real quick? So I was at lunch a couple weeks ago with some buddies, and we go on golf trips a couple times a year together. And we're all in, I'm 47. I think maybe a couple of these guys are, 45 to 55, let's call it that range. But there's 2 guys, and of course we call them grandpa, right? We make fun of them because they're older, but they're 69 years old. And they play tennis 3 or 4 days a week. They exercise. They go on our golf trips. They hang out the whole time we're there. You never hear them say, oh, I'm old and I got to go to bed. And I'm like, so at lunch a couple weeks ago, I'm like, hey, man, talk to me about the last, what'd you do in your 40s and 50s? And he's like, well, we just stayed active and we just exercised all the time. And he's like, we're the only people that are 69 years old in our whole friend group that can do what we do. He goes, we hang around you guys to feel young and get energy. And I don't know, that one hit me really hard.
No, but one thing that you just said that I talk often about is they stayed active. So if you stop being active and then you wake up 10 years later and say you want to get active, it's very tough to get that back. Because and I look at people who are older that start having medical challenges, and the biggest medical challenge is a fall, a physical fall. And, you hear that's often a decline. Well, if you stay active, you keep carrying muscle, actual physical muscle, and you can get these little machines now for not many dollars that will tell you how many pounds of muscle do you have? How many pounds of water do you have? What's your body fat, not just what's your weight, but you want to keep that muscle. And the best way to keep your muscle is just stay active. And I would tell you that, yes, obviously strength training is probably better than maybe tennis in terms of muscle. But I'd tell you that just staying active is going to keep muscle. So it's, and by the way, there's the physical side of it, but then there's the state of mind. And when I work out, I would truly say that probably 80% of my workout is more mental for me than it is physical. In that, in my gym, I have a wall. It's got a whiteboard on it. I think of things. And I am not like a group exerciser. I like solitary. I got if I'm at a gym on the road, I got the headphones in, the billboard, please don't talk to me up, because like it's my time. Like no one bothers me. And by the way, I've written out my day. Here's my meetings. I'm on this podcast. I've got to get these couple things done. I'm kind of subconsciously processing my day while I work out. But then, something that I find really important right after you work out, and this I'm going to give myself A's on the others. This one I'm going to give myself, probably a B minus, but I've worked hard, is quieting your mind. How do you work out, but before you go jump in the shower and just take off, how do you quiet your mind? And I say, quiet your mind for 10 to 15 minutes. And for me, I have tried meditation. I've tried yoga. I just can't do it. It just doesn't connect with me. So what I kind of do now, or I try to do now, is I do like 10 minutes in a sauna. It just allows me to like just cool down, have quiet time. And I find that works really well. I think the biggest thing is whatever your heart rate is at, you're just bringing it down. So if you were doing yoga, it might be meditation. If you were running, it might be the sauna. Right now, there's a big fad on with the cold tubs, which I have tried once, and I found no joy in it. I found no joy in it. Then the last two things that I think that are important in a morning routine is every morning I try, and I would say I'm good at 95% of mornings, to just read for 10 minutes. Now you might notice, like quiet your mind for 10 minutes, read for 10 minutes. And by the way, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn is not reading. Like grab a book. And by the way, it can still be a fantasy book. It can be whatever. It doesn't have to be like a business book, but just 10 minutes where you're actually consuming something. And again, what you're doing is you're also processing. And then the last thing that I tell people is water and protein. Make sure in the morning you're getting water and protein in. Now, I'd like to tell you that I'm this great breakfast person. My parents, gave me a Carnation instant breakfast drink or a Carnation bar on my way out the door. So I'm more of a protein shake guy in the morning, a smoothie person. I don't do the full breakfast, but try to get some good protein and nourishment and water. We don't drink enough water. So if you kind of look at that routine, it goes everywhere from getting up early, getting good sleep, doing something physical, doing something mental, and then nourishing your body. By the time you get to your office, and your office could be your bedroom, your office could be a physical place, you're already so far ahead of probably 90% of the people that are your peers. And that is how you get off to a fast start, but also keep that start throughout the day.
Yeah. Man, I love it. Literally, if the people listening to this show religiously are going to think I probably gave you that to say, because I always talk about that. Now, I hate getting up early, so I'm not a guy that gets up early, but I'll get up and do it in the morning. Maybe I'll do some stuff, take kids to school, come back, do some stuff, and then get back and then get to work, right? But it's true, man. All this stuff, journaling. I mean, I've got my own journal right here that I sell on Amazon, right? Yeah. And it's a 90-day deal, and that is critically important. Your workout, reading. I always say read 10 pages a day. If you read 10 pages a day, you're going to read 20 to 25 books a year. That's a victory, huge victory. Sauna, I love it. Anxious to hear what you say about that. I've read I've read a lot of studies that say that 18 to 24 minutes is the key to decrease all-cause mortality by something like 65 to 70%. So I'm curious on your 10 minutes versus that 18 to 24, what your thoughts are there.
I only have the patience for 10.
There's no science behind it. 10 is better than 0.
There's no science behind 10. And I'll even tell you, with the sauna and reading, I'd be lying if there's not one day a week when I'm looking at my watch being 8 and a half.
Get the hell out of here.
and just because all of a sudden I'm getting, I'm getting excited about a meeting. I'm getting anxious about a meeting. Or I just want to move. I just want to move. But what I find is anchoring myself and just saying, no, I'm just going to be here for 10 minutes, is good. But you do have me taking a note to myself here on 18 to 24.
Yeah.
I'm going to give that a shot. I hadn't heard that before, so I'm going to give it a shot, see how I do.
Yeah. I've got one at the house. So I've been in a bad streak the last 2 weeks of not getting it done, just with lots of stuff going on. But yeah, I spend, probably 4 days a week, 4 to 5 days a week at 24 minutes. I just set the alarm at 24 minutes on the little deal in my sauna and get out of there. I mean, I love it. I think you feel amazing. So that's where I do my meditation. I do my 10 pages, and then I also do some stretching inside there. So then instead of stretching after my workout, I'll stretch out in the sauna just to kind of have it stacked there. But it's interesting. So
yeah, you hit another one of my weaknesses. Like every year I say I got to get better at stretching, especially as you get older. And by the end of January, I've failed.
It's hard.
I've failed because I don't know why it's so obvious. Like you just roll out, just do a little stretching. It's so obvious, but one of these years I'm gonna do better at stretching.
Yeah. Check out golfforever.com. It's you may not even be a golfer, but I think it should be called liveforever.com. It's a band, but it's got like a big stick on the end of it, and it's got all different sorts of exercises for mobility and flexibility. Okay. It's phenomenal. It's like $100 or $200, whatever it is, and it's awesome. But so I digress. But when you said all the stuff that you do, and you're like, I'm ready for this meeting, do you ever have this? Because I have this, and this is why I'm asking, and I'm sure some of our listeners do as well. The guilt or the anxiousness of, God, I know I need to do all these things, but man, I really feel like I need to get to the office. I need to get to work. Like, how did you shed that of letting go and be like, dude, I got to take care of myself?
Yeah, I think my first role, so I started a career where 10 years in a Fortune 100 company. Then when I took my next role, I went out to Silicon Valley. I wanted to be in the Super Bowl of technology, and badge of honor. Doing your 17, 18 hours a day, and I wasn't as good with my morning routine, and I just saw myself at the end of the day not having the same energy. I also caught myself not being as optimistic, not being as solution oriented. Sometimes I wouldn't say being negative, but I'd say being negative for me. And all of a sudden I caught myself and I said, hey, I don't like that. And I traced it back to I'm out of my consistent morning routine. And that morning routine just put me in this like warrior state where I felt like I could do anything. So one rule that I've made, and I will say it's a rule. Now, every once in a while, the rule is broken. I would say, hey, I'm going to show up at the office at 8:59, and the first meeting I'll take is 9. Now, from time to time, will I do an 8:30? Only if somehow they won't do a 9. But what I found is when I just said, hey, 9 o'clock is when I'll start my day in the office and for meetings, generally it worked pretty well. Now, again, based on time zones, based on Europe, sometimes, I had to move things around, but generally that worked pretty well. But what I also did was from 9 through the end of the day, my calendar was open. So people knew, hey, I can get on Brendan's calendar. It's not hard getting on his calendar. Yeah. And what I found is in every meeting, because I think one thing as a CEO or as an executive, when you're in those meetings, for some of the people that are in that meeting, that's their biggest meeting, maybe of the week, maybe of the month, maybe of the quarter. So if you're off in that meeting, like that's who they see you as. So I viewed it as, hey, I got to show up in every meeting like it's an important meeting, and it is an important meeting, and I got to show up and I got to bring energy and I got to really do the best I can. And I found that being the best at 4:30 was directly tied to, did I have a consistent good morning? Yeah. And now sometimes when you're on the road, you just got to back your day up a little bit. You got to be like, hey, I happen to get up at 4:45. By the way, I'm trained to do that, but also I have 2 dogs that sleep with me that are equally trained to be extremely hungry at 4:44. Every once in a while when I'm on the road or I'm in a different time zone and I'm like, okay, based on today, I've actually got to get up, 15 minutes early, 30 minutes earlier. That's fine. But just, I do kind of stay consistent. And I think it is important as an executive, you realize the energy you bring to that meeting is going to be matched by others. And if you're off and if you're tired, that might be a meeting when you meet with, like your HR team, your marketing team, and they might be like, oh, hey, they don't have as good an impression of you as you would ideally like.
Yeah, that's so true. Let's talk a little bit more about this. You got the dry erase board in the workout room, right, in your fitness center. So I write on my windows, any ideas I have, whether it's the mirror in my gym or a window at the office, and just kind of keep a running list of stuff. And do you have a process? And I'll just share my process if I can. So if I write it down on the dry erase board or on my window, whatever, I'll then tell my friend Siri here to remind me. I'm sure she'll come off here to remind me on a certain day. So Wednesdays from 1 to 2:30, I do what I call strategic think time. It's me, a journal, and just thinking and all the ideas I've got. Because I would imagine a guy like you, part owner of 6 companies, investor in 6 companies, you've got a million ideas coming through your brain a day. How do you pick which ones you run with and throw away the others?
Yeah, so I'll go back to, as an operating CEO, one thing I did with all my leadership team members is I said everybody had to physically put on their calendar 2 hours of strategic thinking time a week. And, so I'd go into a company, and I'd say, hey, I need you all to do this. And, first, second week, I'd have guys come in my office and say, okay, I put it on. What do I do during that?
Yeah.
And it was uncomfortable for them. And I said, well, here's the deal. If you don't put it on your calendar, it's never going to come on your calendar. And I think one of the failures of executives is they get busy. And especially good executives that are hands-on and are involved with their teams, right? That are passionate about what they're doing. And next thing you know, this market opportunity blew past you like a bullet train and you didn't see it. And it's not that you didn't see it because you weren't smart. It wasn't that you didn't see it because, you didn't pick up. It was you didn't see it because you were busy. Yep. So I tell people, hey, put 2 hours on your time. I also tell people try not to do it in your office. Go do it in a different room. I'd tell people, hey, one day a week, just go book. Like we would have like little what do you call them? Phone rooms is what we call them. Or just, go book it in there. Go do whatever, go sit at a picnic table. And what's interesting is as people did that more and more, I actually found their creativity and their innovativeness picking up. Now there were other people that were like, hey, absolutely get it, do it. But by doing that, you put it on your calendar. Now, what I'd also tell people is there's times when you're going to put it on your calendar and then you're going to blow it off because you have to, because you got a meeting. Well, after a month of blowing it off 4 weeks in a row, you now are consciously saying, hey, wait, I'm not doing my job as an executive about strategically thinking about my organization. So it's brought to your conscious light that I've got to do more of that. So I personally have always just put it on my calendar. And the reason I put it on my calendar is if I don't, then my calendar's open to everybody. I'm just not going to get it done.
Right.
Now, a couple other tips. I love taking the train. I think the train is great strategic thinking time. I think, when you're on flights, it's great strategic thinking time. Like, because generally you're really not getting bothered. You might get some text, you might get, and by the way, you can even choose, I'm just not going to get text or phone calls while I'm on this. So you have times, and again, travel time can be leveraged for this, that you take advantage of that. So, just a few things on the strategic thinking topic.
So it's funny. So I do the same thing, and I don't do it because every Wednesday would be hard. So I live and work about 20 minutes from downtown St. Louis. But what I find is when I get out of the office, I always either go to the Four Seasons or the Ritz-Carlton, right? 2 very nice hotels. The lobbies are nice, right? And you can just kind of observe. And I'm there by myself. Nobody's going to bother me. I do really good there. And then early in my leadership days, I did this. For 3 years, I would go once a quarter to the West Palm Beach Ritz-Carlton. I love it down there. Then it moved to the Breakers. West Palm Beach or the Ritz got sold. But there's something about being in that atmosphere, that energy, right? Because you can be successful. You go there, man, you're seeing like a whole nother level of success, right? And I just think it's good, right, to get out of your normal territory and your normal space and just get away. I would go by my wife, go by myself. God bless my wife. Or we had little kids at the time. I think we had maybe none at the first time I did it, but then we had kids, so it was just awesome. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, no. So I think what you're getting at is knowing what works for you, and that let's use a compare and contrast. if I went to the Ritz-Carlton and sat in the lobby, I would pick up my head every 2 minutes and look around and be like, oh, who's that? Oh, who's this? Who's that? Like in college, I couldn't study at the library. I liked solitary. I know other people that couldn't study in their dorm room. They had to go to the library. So I think what's important is what works for you and knowing what works for you. But like, if you know working in your dorm doesn't work for you, then don't do it. And by the way, but you might be like, but my roommate got a 4.0 and they do it. Be like, but if it doesn't work for you, like if you're like, hey, I've tried running, but I hate it. It's the worst thing in the entire world. And then you don't do it. Well, don't run.
Don't be a runner. Yeah.
Go pick something else. So I think like using you and me as a compare and contrast, we both do this activity. We just do it differently.
Yeah.
And I like the solitary. I don't like the distraction, around me. And again, that goes back to, using the college example of I wasn't the guy that studied well in the library.
Yeah. I don't know if I studied well anywhere. Anyway, that's not what this podcast is about. How about social life? If you read, have you seen, what is it? It's called the Blue Zones. It's I read the book, but I guess it's also a documentary on Netflix, but the Blue Zones. And it really talks about, movement, which we've talked about. It talks about having a purpose, and it talks about having a group of friends that you can laugh and be social with. That's what they found the most 100-year-olds have was movement, a purpose, and a group of friends. And so talk to us about the busy life that you live. What's your social life like?
Yeah. So what I would tell you is if I charted my social life, it would have started really high, got married, still doing well, accelerating, kids. And it took a sharp dip in the sense that, now instead of saying, hey, is anyone available for happy hour night? Anyone available for dinner? You were heading home. I then say, as my kids started getting older, it started going up because you started being social with all the kids they played sports with and everything.
Going buy pizza after a game or something like that.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden your kids are getting a little bit older and they're doing travel sports. And now it goes down again. Because, somebody says, hey, you want to get together, want to go to the beach? You're like, oh, my summer's toast. I can't make it.
Right.
And you're truly in a great way running around with your family. So it's almost like, your family becomes like, it's you're working, you're in your family, and then friends don't take a back seat, but they aren't in the front seat anymore. And then, I'm just coming into this now where if I said, hey, I was a good friend 5 years ago, I'm a much better friend now. Kids are in college, one's graduating. If you say, hey, when are you available for dinner? I'm like, you tell me. 5 years ago, I would have said June 17th, but I need to eat early.
Right.
And so,
it's I got a game at 6:30. Yeah.
Now, I think one thing that is important, I talk about this state of consciousness is knowing, hey, I'm in for the summer. I'm not probably going to be as good a friend to my friends. I'm not as available. So what do you do when your kids go back into school in September? You reinvest, you go back in. And I think that's something that I have done well is I've consciously said, like, the last company, we went through a sales process. I remember we're kicking it off. We're at a family dinner and I tell everyone, hey, confidentially, we're going to be selling the company. So the good news is, dad's hard work's paid off. The bad news is the next 9 months, I'm going to be working more than I have been. And there's going to be some long nights and, I'll probably every once in a while not be in a great mood because I'm just overworked and I'm tired and everything. Yeah. But like having that conscious state with your family, but then at quote unquote, we sell the company. I remember reaching out to my friend group and saying, all right, we need to take a road trip. And my 10 best friends, we all went on the Patriots jet and went out to a Las Vegas Raiders Patriots game.
Nice.
And by the way, when we landed, a few of my friends said, hey, can you be a crappy friend to us again for a year? Because this is really worth it. But my point with telling that is I consciously knew that for about 9 months, I just wasn't going to be a great friend. Yep. But when that 9 months was over, I didn't want it to become 19 months or 29 months. I just had to consciously say, okay, guys, it's time for me to reinvest into that friendship.
Yeah. Well, I think the key there is you communicated it as well, right? Like
Yeah.
it'd be different if you just came home pissed off at your kids and what the hell's wrong with dad? Well, it's like, oh, okay, let's give them a little grace here maybe, right? Or your friends, let them know, right? Hey, 9 months, I'm going to be a bad friend, but I'm all in once that 9 months is over.
Yeah, and I think that's why I call it conscious balance, is like you're conscious about it. Like,
Yeah.
I have a daughter graduating college this month and she's going into investment banking. Like
Yep.
she has to consciously be aware that she's going to be working,
Working
till
120
midnight,
hours
right?
a week. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
if she's like, hey, I can't wait to get to New York City and build all these friendships and do all these things on the weekend, what I'd say is, hey, time out. You aren't consciously aware of what you're doing. I was talking with another college senior that's graduating, on my son's lacrosse team, and he's going into private wealth financial advisory. And I said, hey, are you consciously aware that that's 80% failure rate?
Yeah.
People that go into that. And he's like, yep. I go, hey, that's great. You're consciously aware that, hey, this is going to be an uphill battle. But if you get there, go talk to people that are in their 50s doing it. They've done very well.
Yep.
Because it's the pyramid. So I think one of the keys to balance or goals, whatever, is being conscious about it, as opposed to, oh my God, like I had no idea it was going to be like this. And then it'd be like, well, that's kind of on you. You should have done a little bit of homework. You should have done a little bit of research, or you just, fell into the trap of wanting what somebody else wanted, not knowing that didn't match what you truly wanted in your life.
Yeah. Talk to us about the FUD factor. And I love this. The FUD factor is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So talk about those three things: fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
So, when I first came up with this concept, like a number of years ago, never would I have predicted how important over time it would become. And what's driven that is social media. If, when I was growing up, if I didn't get invited to a party, I didn't even know the party was going on. I didn't know I was left out, right? Now, if a kid's not invited to a party, just using this as a random example, like they know about it. And by the way, they know who's there. They know where it's at. They know what they're doing.
They see it on the map on their little Snapchat stuff, right?
Snapchat, somebody posts about it, whatever. And so in the world, we've unintentionally injected fear, uncertainty, and doubt with, everywhere from, kids, are you going to make that team? What if you don't make the first team? And, well, I'm uncertain. And next thing you know, a kid goes, I don't want to play that sport anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. And so, society kind of puts this uncertainty and doubt. And at times it's false because, one of my favorite T-shirts I saw somebody wearing one time was, I wish my life was as good as your Facebook life. And, they were kind of making fun that, people putting out this image of everything's great. So if yours isn't that, then you kind of feel like you're falling behind. And, in the opening chapter of Fear, Uncertainty, and Doubt, I kind of call myself out as a parent in that, my daughter got a skateboard, she takes off. And what's the first thing I say to her? Where's your helmet? Where are your knee pads? Where are your elbow pads? There was no conscious thought in her body that she was going to fall. Now, as a parent, I'm like, hey, you need to put this equipment on. So now I'm subconsciously telling her, you might fall.
Right.
So like that happens throughout life. And what winds up happening is then people put limits on themselves. I'm working with the CEO of a company right now, and he's like, hey, well, we're having an off year because the industry's down 10%. And I'm like, well, if you're putting that paradigm on yourself, you're just totally accepting being off by 10%, as opposed to, hey, the industry's off by 10%. We want to grow by 10. That means it's going to be more difficult than normal.
Right.
So, he's put this, the industry's not doing well. It's because of this and it's because of that. And he's put this, and by the way, as he has said that in town halls at his company, he's injected fear, uncertainty, and doubt, by the way, with the best of intentions. He didn't like say, oh, guys, it's going to be a horrible year, don't expect bonuses. But he has basically set the company up that you're kind of proliferating that you're not going to have a great year. Now, as opposed to, hey, guys, the industry's down by 10%. We're going to be up by 10%. That just means we got to be more creative, more innovative. We got to think differently. We got to look at AI. We got to find new clients. And now people are sort of like, okay, they're going home going, hey, we're going to have a good year.
Right.
And by the way, I'm willing to bet, in that company, somebody heard one of those town halls and said, we're not going to have a good year. I should probably look for a job.
Yeah.
And yet, and I guarantee you that's not what the CEO at all intended, but unintentionally breathed uncertainty into the company. As human beings, we like certainty. We like to know there's going to be food on the table. We like to know we're going to be able to pay our bills. We like to know our kids are going to be safe. Like, we like certainty. And I think as leaders, the more we can bring certainty, and by the way, certainty can be, hey guys, we're going to have a successful year. I don't know how we're going to get there yet, but it's going to be successful.
Yep.
So you don't have to have the prescription of how you get there. It was like when COVID hit. COVID was this like global test case of companies that did well and didn't do well. And I'm taking like the toilet paper companies out of the world. Like, the companies that just did well because they happened to offer products that the world needed, take them out. But, take industries that, it was a flip of a coin. Are they going to do well or not? The ones that did better were the ones that entered that phase facing the, hey, it's going to be different. People are going to work from home, but we're going to figure this out. As opposed to companies that said, wow, it's going to be difficult. We're going to have to shut this down, and kind of didn't put their head in the sand, but didn't fight for greatness during that time.
Yeah. I think you're given a different feeling, right? To your point earlier, the culture. Like, if I come in here, it's funny, at the previous firm I was at, our managing partner, and this is 08, 09, they're talking about the recession and all this stuff. And he would show up to our meetings every month and he would say, we're choosing not to participate. We're choosing not to participate. I'm in the wealth management space, right? You had no choice but to participate. But he built it in our minds that we were choosing not to participate. We went out and had these great years. And it's like, now, wait a second. How can you be in the financial industry and have great years in 08, 09? It truly 100% was our mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome, Brendan. Tell our listeners where they can find more of you, social media, websites, everything like that.
Brett, so thank you. So my website is Brendan P, as in Patrick, Keegan.com. Instagram, I'm pretty active on that. It's at BPK Fearless. LinkedIn, it's Brendan P. Keegan. I've got a newsletter on LinkedIn. You can subscribe to that. I got about 150,000 subscribers. I got a couple books out there, the FUD Factor. I've got another one out there, Dare to Disrupt, which talks about how do you build transformational growth. And I will tell you this, every email, text, phone call, LinkedIn message I get, I reply to every single one. Now, sometimes it's, hey, guys, this isn't a fit. So not everyone is always the response you want. But if you reach out to me, I promise you I will reach back out to you. And my purpose in life is to build 1 million fearless leaders. That's what I wake up every day trying to do. And so if you don't reach out to me, you're not allowing me to reach my purpose. So please reach out to me.
That's awesome. Well, we'll put all that stuff in the show notes as well, man. So thanks for being with us, Brendan. It's been awesome having you. I took a bunch of notes here today, and great conversation. I appreciate your time.